Hello, folks. We're back. Episode 9 of the Popcorn Square podcast. This one is titled High Hopes. I am your host, Neff, with
Kage
and
Buttons.
All right, let's get started. Let's talk about Godzilla -1.
Woo.
Now, we know this was December, right? Kage, end of December. Movie that came out. We're covering it now, but I saw it, liked the movie, thought the story was great. We've talked about this movie before, but after watching it, once again, have to praise just the amount of work that went into the movie with the slim budget that they actually used. One of the best movies I've seen in 2023, so I praise them for that. Love the acting in the movie. Love the tone. Wish it would have been a little bit darker. That would have been cool for me.
Yeah.
And I just like the story overall. It was a great story. I would love to see a sequel. I'd like to see them explain a couple things. And I think if we do get a sequel in this movie and they do explain a few things, I'm not giving away too many spoilers here for people that haven't seen it. If you haven't seen it, go see it. But I think if they come out with a sequel that explains a few of the questions that I had in the first film, I would probably actually, in retrospect, look at this first film and grade it at a higher scale. I gave it a 7. I think you could argue a 7.5 or an 8. But I think for their first run at this, I thought it was really good. And I would say that this Godzilla is better than any of the Americanized Godzilla films.
100% agree.
So I'll pass it on to Kage. I know he saw it. I know he has a great appreciation for this movie. I'll let him speak his piece on it, and we'll go around.
Yeah, so for me, I'm going to give it an 8 out of 10.
Nice.
I grew up, as all of us have, watching the American Godzilla movies, going all the way back to, Matthew Broderick.
Yeah, classic.
When I was a kid, that was entertaining. I know it was nothing to write home about, but we had those, and then we had the better ones with Bryan Cranston, the trilogy leading up to Kong, all entertaining stuff. But Godzilla -1 sticks out to me because this is by Toho, the original creators of Godzilla. So this movie was filmed in Japan, in Japanese, by the Japanese director, by Japanese actors that we in America have no idea who they are.
Right.
It was a return to form. I like that it was Godzilla was back to being scary. In the American movies, we're rooting for Godzilla to be to save us from something. You know what I mean? And this time, you're terrified of him. He is wrecking shop. Every time you see the ground shudder, you hear it, people are like holding their breath, looking at each other. Oh God, it's back. So that was the aspect of it that I really enjoyed. And yeah, great movie.
What would you say your favorite scenes were from that movie?
I guess my favorite scenes was the reveals of powers, because it feels like every Godzilla movie there is a new reveal. Everybody knows Godzilla has fire breath.
Right.
I think that's probably the most common thing everybody knows, aside from being big and terrifying and I can destroy buildings because I'm 100 feet tall or whatever.
Right.
That's scary in itself, but he can do all kinds of stuff. And one of the things that I'm probably going to get attacked for this, sorry everybody, I had no idea he could regenerate.
That was something new, and I need to have that explained in the second film, and also aspects of the radiation.
Yeah.
I need to have that explained.
So that right there is, and apologies, I should have said that in advance. Spoilers. I won't go too far.
Not too crazy.
Don't want to go too crazy into explaining the movie. Go see it. I highly recommend it. But no, it's just like when you're watching the action, you're at the edge of your seat. Like, this is a great story. What's gonna happen? Oh, he can do that. Oh, snap! Like, he went from being scary and loud and like, oh, that adds a whole new dynamic to, oh, what are the people gonna do? What can you do? You know what I mean? And yeah. Great.
I praised the acting the most. I thought the acting was brilliant.
Oh, yeah.
And especially for the American audience, not very familiar with actors from different countries, but for it to be in subtitles, yes, it's in subtitles, right? And for those actors to cut through, those Japanese actors, I thought it was great and it was believable. I wasn't watching it like, I don't know, acting's kind of off here. Even in emotional spots, the acting was extremely believable.
It was right where it
I thought it was
to be.
A great movie. Great movie. Buttons, have you seen this at all yet?
No, I have not.
Are you
watched.
interested in watching that?
I will be watching it. Unfortunately, and I feel like this is probably one of the only negative things that you could say about this movie in general is that it is in subtitles.
People will have a problem with that. There's going to be some group.
There has always been, and this goes all the way back to my childhood watching movies, like the Jackie Chan movies, and a lot of his were either had subtitles or they were dubbed. Now, with dubbing in general, obviously it's going to look a little goofy when you're watching it because the voice actors that they get to speak in English, it's not always going to match up exactly with the actors' mouth movements. So that can be some of the funny things that you'll notice if you ever watch dub movies. And I feel like, unfortunately, American culture in general tends to be less likely to go watch a movie if it isn't at least dubbed. And foreign films don't get as much love and appreciation by our culture in general, I feel. Now, granted, having been overseas, I've lived in Germany and I've gone to, places like Japan to visit. Now they have movies in English and, with subtitles, and usually, just like as we would watch a foreign film here, all they have is that option when they're showing it. So, but those theaters still get packed with people. Like, it's crazy how many people will be like, oh yeah, I don't care that it's in English. I'm still gonna go watch it because, it looks like it's gonna be a great movie. And they don't have any qualms about the fact that they'd have to read the subtitles up on the screen because it's still, got that huge draw. And I feel like I said, American culture just doesn't jump on board the same way that other countries will.
And it may be more of an appreciation for the experiment and the experience in the art.
Yeah.
So I've seen that a lot in like European countries, Asian countries. There's more of a appreciation for art. And it may be because, and I don't know if this is everywhere in the world, I've traveled as well, but I haven't traveled anywhere in the last 5 years outside of America.
Right.
Maybe it could be that America gets content so fast. So there's like an ADHD type, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Oh, I like this, but something else is coming right after, so.
Something to kind of go off that. I think if anything, in terms of foreign movies in America, I think the one thing that kind of saves it is the shout out to anime fans out there, because if anyone's going to watch it, it's going to be the anime fans. The anime fans are used to watching stuff. If you talk to any anime fan, I'm sure you've heard the argument of subs over dubs, because just like Neff said, when you're watching at least a Japanese film, talking about that, your translation on the dubbing is different than what is actually being said, and you're going to get a more accurate translation by reading that, and so when you're watching these movies, you can't be kind of multitasking, doing something, fiddling with a fidget spinner or whatever. You actually have to pay attention. But there's a lot of great stories out there. If you pay attention, I can recommend it. I'm a nerd, everybody. You're welcome. I watch anime. I watch foreign films. The Boy and the Heron that just came out. That came out in December. That is, it was out in Japanese and English dubs with an all-celebrity cast. So if you guys seen Spirited Away, stuff like that, fantastic film. Highly recommend it. But no, you are absolutely right. Buttons. There's if the anime crowd are the ones, the Americans that are going to see that, but hopefully, by word of mouth, people can see about it, and these movies will be out on stream soon enough. I highly encourage you and everyone out there to go see them. It's
awesome films. And little tidbit, guys, Toho International is actually putting out black and white version of Godzilla Minus One on the 26th. And it's going to be in theaters in the United States from the 26th of January to February 1st. So that'd be something to go look at, too, on top of seeing it in color as well. I think it's worth both watches. So
and again,
I think that'd be great.
That goes right back to going back to their roots. Godzilla's older than all of us, 70 plus years at this point.
Right.
And back then, yeah, it was shot in black and white, but back then it was still shocking. It was still something to talk about
Exactly.
back then. So that kind of speaks to the power of Godzilla as a franchise. Wow.
Crossover
70
ability
plus
is great.
years. We will show it in black and white and color overseas, and it still has staying power. I challenge every producer in Hollywood to, can you make that claim?
It's tough, right?
It's very
tough
tough.
to beat that. And we actually have an adjustment on the budget. I'm looking at the budget now, and it says 10 million estimated, and the box office is currently sitting at 100 million. So really impressive return there, 10x. So I think we are getting a sequel, and I'm very excited for that.
And to add on to that point, that just goes to show you that big budget doesn't necessarily mean great movie or big reviews. So movies like Saw, low budget, filmed in a room by 2 or 3 guys.
Exactly.
You know, great movie. Godzilla, small budget, huge return. I think the fact that it's shown internationally is a big help. I'm curious to see what the box numbers will be when the black and white version comes out. Yeah, I'm really curious to see how that goes.
It's going to be interesting to see where this movie tops out at. But I
When it's
definitely
all
think
said and
we're
done.
getting a sequel.
I think we need to make a note of what the numbers are now and tuck that away, and then
Go back
find
and
out
look.
what the math is. I want to find out what the adjustment is. Is it an
Right,
extra
right.
5 mil? Is it how much is it going to make when that black and white version is out?
Speaking of budgets, we're going to move on now to 2 movies that were big in January. Night Swim, it's a horror film, and then we have The Beekeeper. Now, we've been trying to do some research on The Beekeeper, and we haven't been able to pinpoint a budget. We're not sure why they're not putting that out there. I believe the box office was 22 million last time I looked. I need to check again. But as far as the budget goes, haven't been able to pinpoint anything. Buttons, do you have anything, any information?
So I tried to go online and try and find some information. As of the 17th, and that was the last time I checked on either of these movies to look at the budget, I was seeing some estimates for The Beekeeper as high as 130 million. However, you know, this movie did have a couple of big names in it, so you know, obviously budget's going to go into that, and this movie was affected, as we have talked about in previous episodes, by the actors' strike and the writers' strike. So I think there was some delays and some probably additional costs based off of those, but I personally don't think the final number was 130. I just don't realistically, I have not seen The Beekeeper, so I couldn't tell you how many explosions are in it, but or how many cars they wrecked or buildings they blew up. I'm not quite sure. That usually is what goes into these large budgets, these action films, is, oh, we destroyed 80 different cars, and we blew up 3 bridges, and, we had to, wreck a couple of the sides of buildings, and, these are all
absolutely.
sets and props and things that go into those high cost budgets on these, as well as the actors. So I don't feel that 130 million is the solid number, but it's probably not too far off if they did have a lot of issues with the strikes.
And something wow, that I'm shocked that I didn't come up with this sooner. That's why action movies can have such a big budget and maybe a small return. It happens. The budget is big because how many AAA actors do you have in the movie? Action movies tend to rely more on practical effects as opposed to CG, because they're really blowing up cars. They're blowing up this building. They're flipping stuff. They got stunt guys on cables to sling them. Then you got to add CG for particle effects, depending on if it's a sci-fi action, whatever. So that's very interesting. I didn't think about that.
Yeah, definitely a lot more hands go into working on the sets and things like that. For not to mention, when you're talking about you've got a group of people sitting in a room, and maybe there's some CG effects that go into it. It's still going to be a lot cheaper because they're going to throw a green screen behind them, and they're going to say, all right, here comes somebody, they're throwing something at you from outside the room or whatever the CG effect is going to be. And it's far different from, and I'm just going to use Fast and Furious as an example here. They're dragging a safe from outside of a building. They have to rip it out of the wall and then drag it down the road and across a bridge and all this. So that means they're blocking off roads. They have to, have all these lever and pulley systems. They have extra vehicles with cameras mounted on each side to catch all the angles, all of the different action that's going on, and multiple takes. And each time they have to reset that scene to do a different take from a different angle. That's going back to the beginning and being all right, guys.
Good point.
Hey, you people, you're my actors that are screaming and running in the background. Let's go. You got somebody who's cueing that, and you've got somebody else who's like, all right, now we gotta release the doves that fly across the screen as they're speeding through. And
that makes me wonder too, like, what if you blow something up, you have a high action scene, and you messed up? Well, you can't re-blow up that car. You can't rebuild that wall. So then the question becomes, do they have like a secondary wall, a secondary duplicate car?
Oh, absolutely. Those
just
vehicles,
So, wow, I did not even
It
consider.
tallies up quick.
It tallies up
This is
quick.
why Fast and Furious has a budget of like $300 million now.
Well, yeah, if you're going to send a car to space, you got to...
It's extreme.
Hi, Elon Musk. Can you help us out? We're filming Fast 20.
So after watching Beekeeper, and we'll talk about that film in another later episode, based off what I was seeing, I would estimate this budget at probably between 80 million and 110 million. Just based off what I saw. A lot of practical effects. There were some CG used, but nothing too extreme. They used a lot of practical stuff there. Kage, what would you guesstimate this budget was, since we can't get a clear number?
I mean, I'm inclined to agree for many, if not all, the same reasons. A lot of practical effects. It was mainly Jason Statham.
True.
It's not like Expendables where you have an all-star cast and you have to pay for all these and pay for all the, so I think 100 mils a safe bet.
Good. And actually, just checking now on the numbers, the box office is sitting at 46.2 million. So, is that movie going to be a success? Most likely not, but still a good movie, and I think it's a movie people should watch. But like I said, we'll talk about that movie a little later. Moving on to Night Swim, I think we have some more clear numbers on that.
Yes.
And everybody here on the panel watched that movie, so we'll have more to talk about that. $15 million is the budget, and the box office is $31.9 million. So once again, another movie that underperformed. I don't know how much Night Swim has left in it. It's a lot of competition coming up in February. Beekeeper's getting a lot of money too that Night Swim probably would have got if there was more separation in time between those two films coming out. So once again, $15 million for the budget, $31.9 million for the box office. When you watched that movie, Kage, what would you think that budget was?
I honestly felt like it could have been maybe 20 mil because I'm watching it. I didn't recognize any of the actors. There was special effects, there was CG, but I feel like it was quite minimal. There was some stuff that could have been CG, but I'm pretty sure it was practical, but it was well shot. I will give them that. I probably would have said 20 mil. I was actually surprised.
Interesting. Buttons, you?
So I actually feel like it could have been shot for less. There was really centered around just one house. There was only like two scenes. There was only like two scenes where they went away from the house. And so, they're saving a lot on the budget for that reason, because they're not having to shoot in multiple locations and do all that. So the CG effects that they did have were pretty much limited to the pool. I feel like everything else was probably just practical effects. Even, some of the things that happened outside of the pool, there was only a few few scenes that would have had some of that CGI magic sprinkled on top. But I feel like if they had wanted to, I think really the budget on this one probably would have had to have gone to the writers themselves, because you had a story that they had done a short story on, and then they're expounding on this. So I think they threw a little bit more money towards taking that short story and making it more interesting and stretching it to that full, I think it was about an hour, 45 minutes to 2 hours or so.
Yep.
But the one thing that I will say, and I do give them props for this, is there was no point when I was watching that, the movie, and saying, okay, they could have spent more money on it. Like, there was no point where I was like, oh, they were being chintzy here. They under-delivered on an effect, or it could have looked way better if they had done something different. So I feel like in that respect, they used it where they needed it and didn't go overboard with it, and it looked fairly realistic for the budget.
I think that's a great assessment.
Really good, really good. Folks, as you know, the episode is called High Hopes. So we're going to be moving on to February and the high hopes that we have for February. Now, there's a few movies on here that I think we're all interested in, and I'll name off a few. I'm going to start off with Argylle. I'm going to keep moving on here, but Argylle, Madam Web, right? I think that's a wild card for us. Bob Marley's one that I think we might all be interested in. And that's really all I'm seeing for February. There's a few other films, but those three stick out. I guess which ones are you guys most excited for? I'm really excited for Madam Web, not because I think it's going to be a Academy Award winner or anything like that, but it's because it's Sony once again taking on the Spider-Man universe. They're actually expounding on it, right? And they're having an all-female cast. So I just want to see how they kind of balance that out. You know, people have high expectations for Spider-Man, I would say. This movie, I don't know the expectations. People probably aren't that excited for it, but once again, I think this will actually segue into a lot of the things that Sony's going to do in the future. If people are not aware, Sony has a lot of Spider-Man projects coming out this year, so I think this is going to be a very important stepping stone for that. If this movie doesn't perform well, people don't receive it well, Sony might have to go back to the drawing board and figure some things out. We know Spider-Man is a home run for them, but you don't want to lead into it with something negative. Kage, how do you feel about Madam Web? And then we'll go on to buttons.
Madam Web, I want to see it just for curiosity's sake. I want to see it because I personally don't know much about the character, the lore behind Madam Web. Spider-Man, I think everybody knows who that is, his origins and blah, 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 but I don't really know much about Madam Web. So for me, it's a curiosity. I think the other aspect, the reason why I want to see it is because Sony has established themselves as a pretty good studio in terms of producing movies on Marvel. Now, granted, Marvel is its own studio, film and comic-wise, but they've proven that, okay, we can handle Spider-Man. We've been doing it for years. You know, we did a great job, and we've continued to do a great job. So this is kind of their introduction to expanding on the Marvel universe. So we're going to see how they do it as opposed to Marvel
how
themselves.
Marvel and Disney
and Marvel's
would do it.
not doing so great right now.
Correct.
So this could be an opportunity for Sony to really show their stuff. Let's see. Could this lead to more Spider-Man, other Marvel stuff away from Spider-Man? Who knows? But that's way out there, speculation.
In the future. Buttons?
Okay, so I am interested in Madam Web. At first, watching that first preview that I saw, I was like, oh man, no. I was like, this is just going to be a hard push to gender swap a character that everybody likes. Everybody likes Spider-Man, and they're like, hey, let's throw a bunch of women at it and, you know, please the masses by all this woman power. And I'm not saying I'm against female actresses playing superheroes. That's not what I'm getting at. I'm saying that, you know, it doesn't have to be all or nothing. It doesn't have to be, you know, the female Ghostbusters where all the female, you know, all the characters that you knew about Ghostbusters had to be female. that to me, you know, it was not well received. And unfortunately, I fear that Madam Web could be the same thing, because I think, and I could be misspeaking about this, I didn't watch the Marvels, but it was a very strong female cast and female-oriented cast for that movie. Now, the original, you know, with Captain Marvel, that was different. That was not all female cast and, you know, only women.
It was more balanced.
It was more balanced. You had multiple characters that helped balance out that screen time, as well as, you know, she was a superhero, and that's great. Now, Madam Web, on the other hand of that, it's like, oh, hey, I'm a woman, I have my superpowers, and now I'm going to gather all of my helpers, and they also happen to be a bunch of women. Why? I don't know. I don't know anything about Madam Web other than that trailer, and it just seems like, oh yes, girl power to the umpteenth degree.
Right.
That being said, I did watch a secondary preview, and it did intrigue me a little bit more than the first one. So it is one that I probably will go see. And again, part of it is, like Kage said, it's the curiosity of it. You know, what are they going to do with it? I just hope that I don't go sit down and watch a 2 to 2.5 hour movie that's just going to shove girl power down my throat and say, I'm
Makes sense.
It's
I'm
like,
too strong for a man to come and save me, you know.
yeah, no, I agree with that 100%. It's just like, if you're going to give me a movie that is all women, do it in a way that makes sense for the thing. When you brought up Ghostbusters, how to tick off a generation, step one, because we've all grown up with Ghostbusters. There's just some things you just don't mess with. It's not like there's generations of Batman. Okay, Batman's been not just Bruce Wayne.
Correct.
You know, if you know about that, for example. But Ghostbusters has always been these 4 guys, you know, and they have the secretary. I think that was their only female person of the story. But
Well, I mean, you have the main character that was Sigourney Weaver's.
right,
You know,
right.
she was a main character within that too.
Yeah, and it's like, if you are a main character inherently, okay. But if they have been a set genre for this many years, you need to be careful with that. Because the people will speak, and in the case of Ghostbusters, they spoke.
Yeah.
That was hated. So if you're gonna have a movie where it's all female cast, do it in a way that makes sense.
Makes sense.
If you're doing something new, a lot of people don't know about Madam Web. I looked it up. The character came out in the 80s.
Yeah.
You're educating people. You have that opportunity to do that, and I think you'll be okay. But if you have an established character, if you have an established cast for many, many decades, and they're male, and you try, or vice versa, be careful.
Yeah, the thing about Madam Web, I believe all the characters are canon. It's just they're throwing them all in there at once. I want to see how they really portray Madam Web, because this is a way younger version than what you see in like the comics. Madam Web's typically like an older woman, so it's going to be interesting to see how they do that. Really interested in that.
And curiosity. That's exactly
Right,
why
that's
I'm
why
going
I
to go
wanna
see
see
it. I want to
this.
see how you're going to handle this. What's this going to be?
It's more curiosity than anything.
Yeah.
I'm not like, oh, this is going to be the greatest. I just want to see how they lay this thing out.
And I will say this, is that, you know, I do think that looking at the cast, they obviously probably picked a younger Madam Web for longevity.
True.
That's a great
You
point.
know,
Yeah.
Dakota Johnson, she is not super young. I mean, she's still in her 30s. So, I mean, you know, she's not the youngest out there. But you look at her co-stars, and they are, you know, closer to that 18 to 24 age group.
Right.
So, you know, they picked a cast that would give them, you know, potential for several movies. And I'm not 100% sure about Dakota Johnson as this character. So I am interested to see how she portrays the character. Just because the previous things that we've seen her in have mostly been more comedies,
Dramas,
and,
right?
well, romance, really. A little bit higher on that comedy, romantic comedy.
Rom-coms.
Yes. Well, I mean, some of them have been like Neff mentioned. Some of them have been more dramatic. Others have been just pure fluff. Just there to entertain.
Correct.
And she's done a really good job with that genre. So in this role, I think they wanted to try and give some of that comedy to the character, which she has the ability to be very funny. I think she is very funny as an actress. But they've seen her do more serious things. So I think they're trying to blend and almost make, a female Spider-Man that's got that serious and comedy together in one thing.
Yeah.
And I think that's kind of why they picked her for this role, because she can bring both of that.
And something I just looked up too. So again, Madam Web, the character, was created in the 80s, and she wasn't necessarily an advisor, a psychic advisor to Spider-Man. Hold on to your seats, folks, if you don't know. Apparently, she is a psychic advisor to Spider-Women in parallel universes. So into the Spiderverse, we have Spider-Woman, we have all these hundreds of thousands of Spider-Men. That is what we're dipping our toes in, folks. We are looking at, she's in the Spider-Man universe, but
Right.
she's not in the Peter Parker universe
Right.
necessarily. There are female Spider-Men out there, which brings a question.
Like Spider-Gwen.
Yeah. Oh my God, guys. Will we be, if depending on the success of this movie,
It can go so many ways.
it can go so many ways. Could they be like, oh, she did really good. We got a franchise on our hands. Now we can, and then that goes into the question of, oh, can we hand the reins over to another Spider-Man? But now we're bleeding into Marvel. It's just like,
Right.
Tom Holland, man, you're playing, you're sleeping with both sides here with Marvel and Sony, and there's going to have to be a choice, but that's a discussion for another time.
Interesting. Moving on to Argylle. Interested in that? Seems like a little special agent movie. I was telling Kage earlier, it reminded me kind of like a Red Notice type movie.
Yeah.
Have you seen Red Notice buttons?
I own both of them.
There you go. So
There you
yeah,
go.
so yeah, it reminded me of like a Red Notice type movie.
Now, are you talking about Red Notice?
I'm talking
or
about
just
Red Notice
Red?
on Netflix
Oh,
with
Red
The
No-
Rock, Gal Gadot.
Oh, okay,
Yeah, not Red. That's with
Not
the old
Red,
people.
that's the old people. I just wanted to make sure we were
Not
talking
trying
about
to
the
be
same
an
thing.
ageist. No,
Yeah, no.
it seems like a Red Notice type little agent movie.
Yeah.
I know Henry Cavill starring in that. I believe Samuel Jackson's in it. Dua Lipa's in it. Seems like a little fun movie. Nothing too serious. Nothing that takes itself too serious, but maybe a little like an action movie with a little comedic spin on it.
Yeah.
So I think that might be an interesting one as well that comes out in February. You guys interested in that at all?
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
absolutely.
And it's one of those slow burn trailers for me. The first time I saw it, I was like, eh. And the more I've seen it, and with movies I've seen recently, Argylle's been a preview that's been coming up. And
Yeah.
I'm like, you know what? I think I am into this.
I think it's going to be interesting.
I think it's going to be a good time.
I feel like just for argument's sake, it is a story that does look like it's blended of other ones.
Yeah.
And, like you said, you kind of mentioned Red Notice. To me, it was giving me a little bit of James Bond vibes as well. And even Spy, because there is that comedic aspect to it.
Wow.
Not so much, or even Get Smart. So anytime you try and blend comedy with a hardcore spy movie, which is what this looks like, or very spy CIA kind of, tropes to them, it's hard not to compare them together and say, oh, this is just going to be, he's a spy, his cover gets blown, some action ensues, and he ends up having to still save the day. And that kind of, this one does look very similar formula, I will say. So I don't know if it's a cash grab, Just kind of like hey, we like all these actors, all these actresses, they fit into these roles. Let's make a fun movie, and we'll make a lot of money, because this is what puts butts in seats. And we already had the death, I guess you could say, of the franchise for, with James Bond, with the No Time to Die, which that they're still trying to push that out. They're still trying to stretch that story, which I feel like they really should have stopped. But I feel like Argylle is kind of like hey, we don't really have a James Bond story out there, so let's throw Argylle in here. And it's kind of James Bondy.
Makes sense.
And I think just something to add to that, I think could be a good thing. I think all three of us have agreed that we kind of want to see more original stories, less sequels. And because we haven't had a James Bond movie in a while, it gives studios an opportunity to say, oh, well, here's what we have. And this kind of movies like this can satisfy that itch,
Fill a niche.
Makes sense.
Yeah, you know what I mean? We can say, what, we haven't had a Bond movie in a while. Let's kind of make our own. Let's see what we can come up with. And this looks like a great time. I for one, am going to try and see this day one, if possible.
Interesting. Bob Marley, One Love, anybody? Any takers?
Yes.
Yes.
All right, Kage, how you
Yes.
feeling about that one?
So, for those that don't know, I listen to many genres of music. I am a metalhead, but I also like piano. I also like long walks on the beach. No, but
Somebody get the man a margarita. Some pina coladas.
Neff,
over
let's
here.
go. Bring it. But notice he didn't say no, folks. No, but reggae has been a big part of my life. The first concert I ever been to, I actually saw the Wailers that used to be with Bob Marley back in the day.
Nice.
Fun fact, that's actually the very first concert I have ever been to when I was very young, and I do remember that. And so I grew up listening to Bob Marley. So when I found out there was a biography, I'm not big on biography movies, but this, I got to see it.
Yeah, the trailer was pretty good.
I got to
thought
see
it was pretty
It looks
impressive.
pretty good, yeah.
And
Buttons.
I feel like the difference between Bob Marley and some of the other, now I would say in the last 5-6 years we've seen several
Biopics.
biographies on musicians. We had Aretha, we had Whitney, we had Elvis, and I'm probably leaving some others out, but because I think they did something with June Carter too, maybe. But regardless of that, Bob Marley's story is unique in the sense of being more leaning towards an activist side. So you have a different story versus just, my life was hard and I had to struggle and here was my problems with addiction and things like that. Bob Marley didn't have those same struggles. He was, he had attempted assassination. That's quite different from, Elvis's struggle with addiction to drugs when she, created that problem himself.
Yeah.
But, and I mean, obviously the argument could be made for Aretha Franklin that she had, because she was active during, the 60s. And so she would have had a lot of more influence as well from that side of things, from the activist side. But, again, and Bob Marley's not an American. So, I mean, he's Jamaican. And so that's another interesting factor, because you go outside of your own culture, American culture, and you get to see how this is different from how we would have had our American history on what happened during that time versus what was happening in other countries during that time.
Right.
Yeah.
Good point. I'm going to ask you guys this last question here, and then we'll probably end up wrapping it up. Do you guys think that the January release dates for the Beekeeper and Night Swim had an impact on the box office?
Well, I will say that the Beekeeper, I don't think it was necessarily a bad time to release, but it does feel more like a summer movie. And I feel like because it had those struggles with the strike, you know, the studios held on to it and said, hey, you know what? Let's go ahead and just throw this in here because it's been sitting on our back burner, you know, not doing anything for us. So there's not a whole lot of competition out there in the theaters. Let's just try and scoop up what we can, being the, you know, the big fish in the small pond.
Yeah, absolutely. For me, I don't think the timing played a huge role in the budget between the two movies. I think there's a lot of things at play here that we'll talk about in a future episode. You know, it got like a 6 out of 5 or 6 out of 10 on average out there. People claimed it was very similar, if not too similar, to John Wick, and I think that right there is a big factor on why it didn't do more. Maybe it would have done more if it was in the summer. I do agree with you, Buttons. I feel like maybe we could have gotten more money out of this, if it was shown in the summer. It's a great action film for any, you know, John Wick fans. I highly encourage you, please go see this. Go see Beekeeper. Do not let the budget scare you.
No, it felt like one of those movies that, again, it was a summer blockbuster. But as we've talked about before, when we look at all the movies that are coming out this year, the other thing that might have influenced the January release is because of the competition.
Sure.
So, you know, you don't want to compete against these other highly anticipated movies. Beekeeper, to me, I didn't even know about it until the end of the year, and it's like, oh, it's coming out in January. And it was like, where did this movie come from?
Yeah, it did kind of sneak up. I agree.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Good. I think that was a great episode, guys. We're going to end it here. As I say, please like, subscribe, comment, ring the bell for notifications, and join us for the next episode of the Popcorn Square Podcast. This is Neff signing off.
This is Kage.
And Buttons.
Be safe.